the Eternal Sleepwalker. It began with the faintest sense of déjà vu. Nathan Carter had always been an average man, living an unremarkable life as a librarian in a small, quiet town. But for the past 6 months, his mornings had been anything but ordinary. He'd wake up in unfamiliar places, parks, rooftops, abandoned buildings, without any memory of how he'd gotten there. At first, he blamed stress or exhaustion, but the truth was far stranger. The breaking point came when he woke up shivering on the edge of a remote mountaintop. The sharp scent of pine and the distant howl of wind greeted him as the sunrise painted the horizon in fiery hues. He wasn't dressed for the bitter cold, and his shoes were caked with dried mud. Panic set in as he realized he had no recollection of the journey. His phone was dead and there was no sign of civilization. Nathan stumbled down the mountain, his mind racing. Hours later, he reached a ranger station where a curious poster caught his eye. It was a decades-old missing persons notice for a man named Thomas Grayson, who had vanished under mysterious circumstances in the very area Nathan had woken up. Grayson's body had never been found. Back home, Nathan's unease deepened. As he dug into old news archives, he discovered a chilling pattern. Every location where he'd mysteriously awakened was connected to an unsolved murder or disappearance, some dating back decades. The victims shared no clear link, different ages, genders, and backgrounds, but the crimes were eerily similar. Each victim had been lured to a remote place and left to die. One night, determined to find answers, Nathan set up a camera in his bedroom. He awoke the next morning in an abandoned warehouse, the taste of blood in his mouth and dirt under his nails. When he reviewed the footage, his blood ran cold. At 2:34 a.m., his body had risen from bed with unnatural grace. His eyes were wide open, but his expression was vacant, like a puppet on strings. He watched as his sleeping form slipped out the window, scaling walls and navigating rooftops with inhuman agility. The figure he saw on the screen was not the Nathan Carter he knew. Desperate, Nathan sought out Dr. Elaine Fisher, a specialist in parasomnia disorders. When he explained his condition, she seemed intrigued but skeptical. "It sounds like extreme somnambulism, but the complexity of your actions is unprecedented. Sleepwalkers don't usually plan or navigate with such precision." She agreed to monitor him overnight in a controlled environment. That night, Nathan was restrained to a hospital bed, electrodes attached to his scalp to monitor brain activity. At precisely 3 a.m., the monitors began to spike erratically. Nathan's body convulsed, then stilled. His eyes opened and he began to laugh, a deep, guttural sound that wasn't his own. Dr. Fisher watched in horror as Nathan spoke in a voice layered with tones, as if several people were speaking through him. "He is the vessel," the voice declared. "We are eternal." Nathan's restraints snapped as if they were paper, and he moved with impossible strength, slamming through the locked door and vanishing into the night. When Nathan woke up the next morning, he was standing in the middle of a misty forest. At his feet lay a shallow grave, freshly dug. Inside was a skeleton, its arms twisted unnaturally. He recognized it from the missing persons poster, Thomas Grayson. Nathan realized the truth. He wasn't just sleepwalking. He was reenacting the murders of past victims, guided by an unseen force. These victims hadn't been chosen at random, they were part of something much darker. He was a conduit for their pain, their unfinished stories, and their vengeance. But why him? Nathan's research led him to an ancient legend of the Eternal Sleepwalker, a cursed soul destined to walk the earth, bound to the restless dead. The curse, it seemed, could only be broken by solving the murders he was compelled to relive. Armed with this knowledge, Nathan began his grim quest. Each night, he braced himself for the next waking nightmare, knowing it brought him closer to freedom, or madness. But as the pieces fell into place, he uncovered a sinister truth. Not all the victims were innocent. Some were predators, killers themselves, their crimes buried along with their bodies. Nathan realized he wasn't just a pawn. He was the arbiter of justice in a cycle far older than he could comprehend. And as he stood on the edge of another crime scene, the wind whispering ancient secrets, he wondered if he would ever wake up for good, or if he was destined to wander forever, a captive to the Eternal Sleepwalker. The realization that some of the victims had been monsters themselves twisted Nathan's understanding of his role. What force could guide such a curse, one that not only sought justice for the wronged but also retribution for the wicked? Was this truly justice or something darker masquerading as it? Nathan's nights grew longer, his awakenings more terrifying. Each time he solved a murder, he felt both a grim satisfaction and a deeper sense of dread. The sleepwalking episodes became more intense, his body pushed to its limits as he navigated treacherous terrain, reenacted struggles and unearthed buried truths. But it wasn't just the physical toll that wore on him, it was the mental strain. Nathan began to hear whispers even during the day. At first, they were faint, like echoes at the edge of his consciousness. But as the weeks passed, the voices became clearer. "Finish what we started," they urged. "Set us free." The voices weren't just the victims. Among them were the perpetrators, their tones filled with mockery and malice. They taunted him, reliving their gruesome acts, reveling in his torment. Nathan was becoming a battlefield for the living and the dead, a conduit for vengeance and guilt alike. Dr. Fisher, desperate to help, insisted on another session under controlled conditions. This time, she introduced a hypnotic technique designed to access Nathan's subconscious during his sleepwalking episodes. The experiment worked too well. Under hypnosis, Nathan spoke with the same layered voices as before, but now they revealed more. "We are the echoes of the forgotten, the unburied, the unjust. He is our vessel, chosen by the Watcher." "Who is the Watcher?" Dr. Fisher demanded, her voice trembling. "The one who sees all. The one who binds us. The one who decides when the scales are balanced." Nathan woke screaming, his mind flooded with fragmented memories that weren't his own, images of lives stolen, crimes committed, and deaths suffered. He realized the curse wasn't random. The Watcher, whatever it was, had chosen him because of his own past. Years ago, Nathan had been the sole survivor of a car accident that killed his parents. The guilt of surviving had haunted him, but now he wondered, had it been an accident at all? The whispers seemed to suggest otherwise. One night, Nathan awoke not at a crime scene but in a desolate church. The air was thick with decay, the pews broken and rotting. At the altar stood a shadowy figure, its form shifting like smoke. "You've come far," the figure said, its voice a blend of all the others. "But there to uncover?" Nathan approached, trembling. "Why me? Why was I chosen?" The figure extended a hand, and Nathan's mind was flooded with a vision of his childhood. He saw himself as a boy, standing by a creek, watching another child struggle in the water. The child's cries for help were drowned out by Nathan's own fear. He hadn't acted. He had let the boy drown. The Watcher's voice boomed. "You were chosen because you, too, are guilty. You, too, have blood on your hands." Nathan fell to his knees, the weight of his forgotten sin crushing him. "What do you want from me?" "To finish the cycle," the Watcher said. "You must face the ultimate test. The final judgment lies not in solving another's crime but in atoning for your own." Nathan's next sleepwalking episode took him back to the creek of his childhood. In his hands was a rope, its frayed edges tied into a noose. He realized what the Watcher demanded, his own life, offered as penance. But Nathan hesitated. Was this truly justice or was it manipulation? Could he atone in another way by continuing to uncover the buried sins of others? The voices screamed, demanding his choice. The Watcher's shadow loomed, its presence suffocating. Nathan stood at the edge of the water, the rope in his hands, and for the first time, he made a decision not out of fear but defiance. He threw the rope into the creek and turned to face the Watcher. "I won't be your pawn anymore," he said, his voice steady. "If you want me to balance the scales, I'll do it on my terms. I'll fight for the innocent, expose the guilty, and end this curse, without sacrificing myself." The Watcher's form flickered, its edges unraveling. "You defy me?" it hissed. "I reclaim myself," Nathan replied. The world around him shattered like glass and he awoke in his bed, drenched in sweat. The whispers were gone, but he knew the battle wasn't over. The Watcher would return and the curse would persist. But Nathan was no longer afraid. He was determined to break the cycle, not as a victim but as a force of his own will. The Eternal Sleepwalker had awakened, not as a cursed soul, but as a man who would rewrite his destiny. Months passed, and Nathan's life became a tenuous balance between the waking world and the realm of the cursed. Each night, he prepared for the possibility of being drawn into another unsolved crime, but something had changed. The Watcher's presence, once oppressive, seemed diminished. The voices that had tormented him were silenced. Nathan poured his energy into his quest, using his librarian skills to uncover cold cases and forgotten crimes. He worked tirelessly to piece together evidence, connecting dots that investigators had missed. He found ways to notify authorities anonymously, leading to justice for the victims he had been forced to relive. Yet the curse lingered. On occasion he would wake up in strange places as if the Watcher were testing him. These episodes grew less frequent, but their meaning was clear. The curse was not fully broken. Nathan still owed a debt. One fateful night, Nathan awoke in a graveyard under a full moon. The air was still and the ground beneath him was freshly dug. At his feet was a single unmarked gravestone, its surface polished and blank. A figure emerged from the shadows, an old man with piercing eyes and an otherworldly presence. "You've come far," the man said, his voice calm but powerful. "But you cannot outrun the truth forever." Nathan recognized him immediately. It was the boy from his childhood, the one he had let drown in the creek. "I tried to atone," Nathan said, his voice shaking. "I've done everything I can to bring justice to others." The boy, now a man, smiled sadly. "And you've done well. But justice isn't enough. The curse was never about punishment, it was about acknowledgement. You've buried your guilt just as I was buried. It's time to face it." Nathan fell to his knees, the weight of his guilt crushing him once more. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I was just a child. I didn't know what to do." The man knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And now, as a man, you do. Acknowledge your guilt and forgive yourself. Only then can the cycle end." Nathan closed his eyes, the memories flooding back in vivid detail. The fear, the helplessness, the moment he chose to turn away. He embraced the pain, allowing it to consume him, and then slowly he let it go. When he opened his eyes, the man was gone, and the graveyard was silent. The gravestone now bore an inscription. "Here lies the past. May it rest in peace." Nathan felt a lightness in his chest, as if a great weight had been lifted. For the first time in years he slept soundly that night. The curse never returned. Nathan continued his work, solving cold cases and bringing closure to the forgotten, but now it was by choice, not compulsion. He lived the rest of his life not as a haunted man, but as one who had faced his demons and emerged whole. The eternal sleepwalker was no more. Nathan Carter had awakened, free at last.